Good evening and welcome to Spin Legal on November 27th at 6:15ish with myself, Peter Giblett, and her, Angela Browne. And we are partners at Invictus Legal, and tonight our topic is an introduction to forensic investigation of crime. And we're putting crime in this one because we're looking at a future date of doing forensic investigation when it comes to civil matters. Yep. All right. So this is episode number 44 for those that are following our episode numbers. And if you want to contact us, you can do so at Invictus Legal LLP, calling 905-688-5598. And Angela's email is angela@weareinvictus.legal, and mine is peter@weareinvictus.legal. Or go to the website, which is https://weareinvictus.legal. There you go. So,
did they connect us to the different places? The YouTube, Spin Legal, Invictus.
Yeah, where we are actually live on Invictus Legal on Facebook, and we got it on Spin Legal for the first week on Facebook, and of course with my YouTube account. All right.
Yeah. So, YouTube should be consistent. Yep.
Yeah. So everybody knows where we are. All right.
Okay.
So
good.
I encourage you to go look at Spin Legal on Facebook. It's new. We've been waiting for it to come live over the last few weeks, and I think this is the first one we've managed to get, or was it the second one?
At least Zuckerberg let us do that.
Yeah, and just for a note, both Angela and I have been on LLB courses, so we've studied criminal law at university, and our discussion today is more one of theoretical interest discussion, a theoretical discussion, because paralegals don't represent many criminal matters. All right?
It's usually summary conviction court where we go, and it's not very common for forensics to be involved in summary conviction court.
Or not that level of forensics anyway.
Not that level. Like we don't do blood.
You might have fingerprints to prove a person was there.
Unless you're dealing with condo law or something where they've actually had your dogs, where there are some condos where they put something up for a dog so that the dog's DNA could be taken, and then if they find that person hasn't picked up their dog as they take their dog for a walk outside, they can actually tell which dog it was and know which condo owner to find.
However, here's the thing: if I were a dog owner in said condo, I'd be a refusenik. I want your dog DNA, Mr. Giblett. You're not having it. You give me a warrant and you can get it.
Yeah, what did they do to those poor dogs and get the DNA?
Yeah. But you know what's gonna happen with a lot of people. That's what they're gonna do, right? Yeah. Okay, so just to let everybody know, forensics is about the physical trace evidence that it's left behind at a crime scene. Things like bugs, prints, DNA, and a whole heap more. We were having this theoretical discussion about how it's possible to kind of be arrested with DNA evidence because you were at the scene at one point, right? Yeah. And you never know. Hey, if you went to I don't know, the Bay, and you were getting yourself a new blouse, and you happened to be in the changing room that a few hours later, somebody was murdered in, your DNA might be there because you might have scratched yourself at the time and left epithelials in the changing room.
Mm-hmm.
You never know. It's a kind of oddity, that one. But anyway, well, we'll get to that. Okay, so one of the first points is about the crime scene itself. And I said more than CSI Vegas because everybody knows about what CSI Vegas is all about. And let's be honest.
It's not all resolved in an hour either.
Pardon me?
Watch TV. It's not all resolved in an hour.
Yeah. It's not solved in an hour, that's for sure. Yeah. and actually, if you think about it, DNA, things like CSI Vegas is purely fictional, and they even call that. It's called the Locard exchange principle. Yeah, absolutely, Mr. Dopal.
Yeah.
All right. Okay, so as I said, it's more than CSI Vegas. Doesn't get solved in an hour. Can sometimes take a while to get to solve these crimes. And for example, DNA. There's been instances of murders that have been created that were done in the 70s that have only been resolved recently.
Yeah, or people who've been put in prison in the 70s or 80s and have been released because found that the DNA could not have shown that person could have done it.
Yep,
people were released on it.
Yep, the historical DNA evidence could not sustain that conviction. Okay, another thing to think about is the scene of a fire. Actually, let's just say it's obviously many times that's a crime scene. Not always, because fires do happen accidentally. But where a person is killed in a fire, they have scenes of fire investigators.
Mm-hmm.
And they're looking at forensics as well.
Yep. And then there's people who might be killed in a fire, but they can tell whether someone killed them first and then put them on fire.
Yeah, strangle them is different than if they died in a fire.
Yeah, and it's very these things. It's very important. So this is why, like, if that's what you're thinking of doing, I mean, you can't hide it by.
We don't recommend any of these things at all, ever.
These are things we don't recommend.
Yeah, we definitely don't recommend.
Yeah, okay. Recommend that people follow the law and don't kill people.
Of course, the big question there is how did the dead meet their fate, right?
And this is where I've always been interested. That's why I read a lot of crime novels and watch a lot of crime series.
Same here. Although the irony is, when I went to bar school, one of the first things that the professor at bar school told me is that, hey, it's a good job you weren't studying 30 years ago to the bar school. If you'd have come in the 60s or 70s, the first thing you would have done in your bar school would have actually been you'd have spent a month in the pathology lab looking at dead bodies. Mm-hmm. You wouldn't be touching them, but you'd be looking at them as coroners and pathologists sort through the dead bodies. So and he said the numbers of people who threw up in that classroom were incredible.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then people who have seen dead bodies, like I have, it's, you kind of go here, and then this is why you learn, how did they die? Why did they die?
Yeah.
And not all the time they died of anything horrific, like it's not always a deliberate death. Many times it's an accident.
And the interesting thing is, like they show you on CSI, entomology, pathology, and toxicology have got some bits to do with it. So entomology is a scientific study of insects, their relationships with other organisms, the environment, and humans. It's a branch of zoology that includes biological, agricultural, and environmental sciences related to it, mainly to insects. So there you go. So
the interesting thing about entomology is that there was a researcher at Brock University who was doing experiments on insects, particularly blowflies and other types of flies, where they can actually determine by what stage of development the different flies are in about how long the body has died, the time of death.
The next one on this list is pathology, which is the study of diseases, including the causes, nature, and effects. It's a medical speciality that underpins many aspects of medicine, from diagnosing illnesses to monitoring chronic conditions to genetic research. And you think to yourself, well, why does that have to deal with death, right? Because in fact, what they're looking at is preconditions that you may have within your body.
Yeah.
that might have brought about death. So is that death natural, brought about by something else, or caused by something, let's say a heart, somebody threatened you, who die of a heart attack?
Yeah, a coroner has to consider all of those possibilities.
Yes, absolutely they do. The next one of that trilogy is toxicology, which is the study of how chemicals, substances, and situations can harm a living organism.
Yeah, and
that's fairly clear, really.
Some substances are deliberately used through the human body because they leave the human body very fast.
So let me, excuse me a while I take imbibe my toxicology, my coffee.
Your toxicology.
My toxic.
Ours is our toxic water.
Yeah. So I'll have toxic coffee and she can have toxic water. There you go.
Yeah, it comes right from our rivers and streams and our lakes.
But the point being is that all of these things, when added together, can put unique circumstances about the death of an individual. And we're talking here about the worst of crimes, of course, and very often we're not looking at these things when you're talking about a theft or a burglary or something. Right?
I might be looking at fingerprints around the
Well, I was just going to say, we come on to the next one, fingerprints. Yeah. And fingerprints, of course, have, fingerprints we know about quite commonly today. They're in the Western crime, they've only been used for about 130 years, I think. And then I was just going to talk about a little bit of that history, because the history of fingerprints is fascinating, because Chinese records from the Qin dynasty 221 to 206 BC include details about handprints, so the handprints, and used as evidence during burglary investigations. So clay seals bearing ridges impressions were used from both the Qin and Han dynasties between 221 BC and 220 AD, so over a 400-year period. In Persia, they started to look at history of fingerprints, and in the 1400s, in 1684, Dr. Nehemiah Grew was the first European to publish a paper on friction ridges on skin observations, and sometime Johann Christopher Andreas Mayer in 1788 was the person who discovered that these things are all unique.
Right? Even in identical twins.
Yeah.
But a lot of people think they're exactly identical. They're not exactly identical.
Yeah, their fingerprints differ, even though their DNA is the same.
Yeah.
And
so
realistically,
if you're listening to this, we can tell you apart that way.
Yeah. And the interesting thing is about this is that there is a history of somebody who signed a contract with a handprint in India in 1858. Right? A Howell handprint. That was a binding contract put together from the handprint. And they've done a lot. Obviously, they've done a lot of investigations. And realistically, the American Journal of Microscopy was one of these that essentially started the use of fingerprints within criminal, within the criminal investigation world. Right. So
and this is the thing, like in the United States, and I think even in Canada, they have like a database of fingerprints. Okay, not everybody is in the database, but in some European countries, everybody is in the database. Okay, they birth.
I'm not sure that I'm a great fan of everybody being in the database.
Me neither. I don't want to be in anybody's database.
Yeah, and the thing is,
unless I'm in line for a multi-million-dollar check or something.
Yeah,
I could be in a database, whatever.
But that means, Angela, you want to be in tonight's lottery database, don't you? with the winning numbers right beside your name, you know. So when they call out 658, etc., etc.
Yep, my fingerprints are all over them.
Your fingerprints all over that ticket. Yes, exactly. And I wish you best of luck because I'm winning tonight. Right. Okay. So another one that's come on board, and this is only came in really in the 1980s, was DNA, which stands for
Deoxyribonucleic acid.
yeah,
Nucleic acid.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a part of your genetic structure.
Yeah.
Part of who you are, the fiber of your being.
And
everybody has unique DNA.
And the interesting thing is about this is that everything that comes from planet Earth has probably like 70 or 80% identical DNA. Yep. Right? We differ from the great apes by less than 0.5% of DNA.
Yeah, but some people went over that 1% and they became apes.
Oh, that's a
remember Planet of the Apes? Hey,
that's a nasty subject. But DNA has come a long way if you think about it. Everybody can probably remember DNA. That probably everybody's first memory about DNA and being used in evidence was probably at the O.J. Simpson trial.
Oh yeah.
Right, and how what's her name? The prosecutor, she put on the stand a guy who was a DNA what do you call it, statistician. Mm-hmm. And he bored everybody to tears, and that's probably what made OJ not guilty. Along with, of course, the gloves don't fit.
Oh, he put the jury to sleep. Okay.
Yeah, he put the jury to sleep on that particular thing. And Marcia Clark really didn't test that on a test jury because, honestly, the guy needed to give like 10 minutes worth of evidence and get off the stand, mate.
Yep.
Give us the
key issues that they need.
Bullet points. Yeah.
Yep.
Right. This applies to only one in 150 million people in America. And hey, there's only 300 million people in America. So at the max, there's only 3 people in America with the same DNA.
Yep.
Right. And hence O.J. Simpson could have done it. Mm-hmm. I'm not making any projections about that particular case or criticism of the lawyers involved in it. Right?
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, we watch these things, and it's interesting when we watch them. Hey, there are true crime documentaries, which kind of show you a little bit about these things.
Well, we've already referred to CSI Vegas and the whole CSI franchise, of course.
Yeah. But true crime series are basically shows that actually document things, where you're actually looking at real killers, real serial killers, or situations where there's domestic violence or different, like the Unabomber, things like that, where they've talked about things about real criminals and how they've found them, how they track them.
Yeah. Oh, there's been a lot of actual. And when you think about it, before the use of DNA, I think that largely they got lucky.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Sometimes they got a confession.
Yeah. Often they got a confession, they arrested the person. But one of the most famous, of course, got away with it was, of course, Jack the Ripper.
Yep. Right? And this is one that has been written about and shown in documentaries time and time again. Nobody knows who he is.
Yeah.
Or he was.
There's lots of theories out there. There's some interesting suspects out there, but nobody knows who he is, and they certainly haven't proven it by things like DNA.
Yeah, and this is
the interesting thing is about this that one fact that they did prove through DNA on the Ripper murders, right? They found an apron with blood stain on it, and the blood stain belonged to one of the victims. right? And that's the total amount of blood stain analysis they've managed to come up with in 140 years. Yeah, 140 years, right? So,
And what is interesting, and it's also scary too, is that people who are going to be criminals, who are going to be serial killers, they're learning too much about forensics, and they're finding
yeah.
ways around it. And we have to kind of keep it sort of where, but the science is moving very fast.
Well, I was going to say the first thing, of course, is that if you're living in the modern era and you were a would-be rapist, for example, you'd be going, "Oh, DNA. Oh, I better put a cap on it." You know what I mean?
Your condom.
Yeah, yeah. Use a condom, right? So they tried to collect DNA from Catherine Eddowes' shawl. Yes, yeah, that was the one. That was the one, and they proved it was hers. They didn't find any foreign DNA. It was Catherine Eddowes. Yes, I remember that now.
That is interesting too when you're looking at that story.
Yeah, they didn't find any foreign. So, in fact, you were talking about a person who was savvy to DNA 140 years ago.
Yep, exactly. Now we had
Everybody.
Paul Bernard. He almost got away with a lot of things.
Well, it's the same with several serial killers. When you think about it, they caught the Yorkshire Ripper. They had him in prison. They had him in lockup about 4 years before he was caught, and he actually confessed, "I did it" at one point, apparently, to the police, and they let him go. They didn't believe his story because it seemed like everybody everybody was confessing to that crime at a particular time.
Confessions are something where you have to be careful when you're dealing with the legal system, because there's a lot of times people are made to confess when they really didn't do something.
Yeah.
Or other people will go and confess because they want to brag.
Yeah.
Hey, there's a lot of reasons why people confess that have things that have nothing to do with having actually done the crime.
Oh yeah, yeah, and actually, when you think about it, like the Yorkshire Ripper and people like Charles Manson, they didn't get convicted because of DNA. They got convicted because of other issues.
I remember Robert Pickford.
Pickford, the name rings a bell. Remind me.
Pig farm.
The pig farm, the BC one. Yeah.
That was a very interesting investigation.
They believe there's probably splattered remains of chewed up dead bodies all over that pig, all over that part of BC.
Yep. Because all they knew is that there was missing women. Women were going missing all the time, and then until they were directed over there, and then they had enough information at one time to go in there and start digging up, and they found some of the DNA of women that went missing.
Yeah.
And so because it was on their property, then they arrested them. There were two brothers that were running the property. So they got the one guy because he was a bit of a goof. And then he went in there and he admitted to 50 murders. He recently he'd been killed in prison actually recently.
Oh, was it?
Know a little bit of history of him. He just recently was killed by another inmate.
There was an interesting one. I went to, so I'm talking about the other ones associated with blood splatters, of course, DNA. DNA is blood splatter, I mean, blood spatter. It's spatter, not splatter, right? And these are about pattern analysis, because if you kill somebody by a swinging action with, let's say, a knife, as you go first time, there's no blood, of course, when you swing first time. But when you take the knife out and you swing it back up, there's blood occurs in a particular pattern. And I was at a murder trial in the Old Bailey, and I was watching them give an expert give evidence about give blood spatter evidence. Fascinating. because he was telling how he could tell the height of the individual and how he was on his knees at the time the crime occurred, and which I think he was left-handed, which was reduced the numbers of people in the area. So as he's left-handed, the spatters going across the left-hand wall of the hallway in which the gentleman was killed in, and so they could immediately knew it wasn't a right-handed person.
Interesting.
And they could then measure. They went and looked at the local people in the local houses, or people that had something to do with that group, and could immediately tell that there's about a dozen people that sprung out as potential suspects. So their suspect pool, because of the left-handedness and the height, they had a size, they had a reasonable suspect pool that they could start looking at.
Yep.
And that's about what those kind of things do. And as I said, that was about, they knew that he was on his knees doing it. And, because of disturbances, scraped wallpaper and the like, they knew exactly where the body and how the body was laying. They knew exactly what had happened and how the body got to where it got.
Another interesting thing is defensive wounds.
Yes.
Yeah, so if somebody's being attacked and before they get killed, they're scratching and trying to dig their hands in there, and they go on fingernail scrapes, right, to figure out if they can get DNA out of that. And also, if they're interviewing a suspect, they want to check the condition of them.
Have you got a cut in your left second finger?
Or did somebody poke her eye out or something? Let's look at it.
Yeah. Okay. Another one that comes in is anthropology. So anthropology is a study of humans, past and present, at home and around the world, social, cultural, and linguistic and biodiversity that comes into play here. So anthropology may tell you more about the victim. We hadn't included it till now because it's a more minor thing, but it's something that can tell you something more about the victim, especially when you've got victims that might well come from particular ethnic groups.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And that may actually give you links to suspects as well.
Yeah, we've had that before, when all they found was bones and all they were able to do is tell the ethnicity and gender.
Well, and there's been a lot of instances where there's been bones. In fact, actually, that was an interesting one that, for example, Ancestry DNA do this advert where they're talking about, we can tell where you come from, where your ancestry is from, So you're from some little town in Poland, although you thought you were from France. Right?
Well, you're reincarnated from a toad in 4 BC.
Yeah. Okay, and going on to another one, there's been a few instances of this one, facial reconstruction. The one that was most telling that I remember was actually there were 35 victims in the King's Cross fire. They found and understood 34 of the victims. They could not for years figure out the 35th victim. It took them a long time, so they actually did facial reconstruction from this burnt skull. And eventually somebody came forward. That was a second or third attempt at facial reconstruction, and somebody came forward and identified the individual.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And the interesting thing about facial reconstruction is that you're doing it, and we're talking obviously mostly, it's going to come about through murder, or in that particular case, death by misadventure. But the facial reconstruction piece is that you actually need to know who the victim is.
Yeah, and this has always been interesting, because There was a case where there was a little girl, she was about 8 years old, and she was kidnapped in Toronto.
Mm.
And then nobody knew where she was. Nobody ever saw her body. There were a number of suspects over the years. One person was ruled out for DNA and other things, and he was released eventually. And then they're still looking for another person that were on the scene. But they kept on reconstructing her face because this was going on for many years, trying to find this person. And she would be like in her 20s at that time. But the way they did it, they had a facial reconstruction, a computer model, as well as a hand done model through an artist.
Yeah.
It was fascinating.
Well, the interesting thing is about this, when you poke your cheek or something, you think, well, my bone is probably 3 to 4 millimeters inside the outer surface of my skin. No, it's not. It's that's fake. You know, there's a lot of padding in there.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Let's hope it's not just there.
And it does differ from men to women as well, because fat cells, and how and how they impact the body features, etc. For men, it differs from men to women.
Mm-hmm.
But they can tell. The fortunate thing is, from a skeleton, they can tell they can tell the birth sex of a cadaver. Right? They can't tell. They couldn't necessarily tell if you've had transformative surgery. So they could tell that it was that this person was born male, for example. But Michael, who becomes Michelle, they wouldn't know that it was Michelle, but they'd only know that it was Michael. They could and those people who deal with facial reconstruction would go from sex and go, okay, so Michael, therefore he would look this way, and they'd probably put this type, the type of hair that I'm wearing rather than the long hair that you're wearing on.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, if it was a trans person and you looked at them and you went, well, that looks somewhat like Michelle, but it's not, because it's a man.
Mm-hmm.
They're putting moustaches on, they're putting short hair on, and maybe you don't go to the police, thinking that's Michelle that's, that they're showing there, and Michelle's been missing for the same amount of time.
Yeah, the only way you'd be able to tell is if you had family members of Michelle who would be able to offer up their DNA, and then you have this particular body, and then do a comparative sample of the DNA, and this is the only person missing.
Well, and that was actually, so you were talking earlier on about DNA and how Europeans actually saved the DNA for everybody.
Yeah.
Right. In that particular instance, and British don't as well, British and North Americans don't, the English-speaking world does not. In that particular instance, if you found a body, the chances are you could find the DNA and find the missing person, have a missing person match.
Yeah. And they do it just for that purpose. There's always been some discussion about whether this should be something that's made universal. But then there's always the possibility of the data banks being misused, or some breach of the information of the data banks.
That is our fear, of course, in the English-speaking world, isn't it? That we don't, for want of whether it's real or a conspiracy theory, we have a tendency not to trust our police.
Yeah, like Equifax had its data breach, CRA had its data breach, other companies themselves had their data breach, and Life Labs. Generally what happens is they tend to have class action suits, and those that are affected can write in there and get compensated to whatever extent their data was breached. But it's very interesting there, because privacy has always become more and more of a thing.
Yeah. And I suppose there's some slight differences in how we view the law between many European nations and many the English-speaking world. For example, I always found when I lived in Germany, I always found most Germans tend to kind of, there's a law, it's a local law, it's a stupid law, and most Germans just obey it. Yes, thou shalt not cross the road on Thursday afternoons between 12 and 6. Yes, I won't do it, right? And they don't.
Canadians were like that.
No.
I made a joke one time about how the light was forever red because it was broken, and then the Canadian would be forever standing on that other side of the street waiting for the light to turn green, and the light never turns green, but the Canadian's still there.
Well, the Englishman in there will go, bollocks, we're doing it.
F this, I'm crossing anyways.
Yeah, I'm crossing. Get lost. I'm not doing that, Yeah. Right? Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Once we get off the murder things, there's still significant forensic things that might well have relevance. One of these is forensic accounting, and essentially that's things for crimes like fraud.
Yeah.
Bernie Madoff.
Yeah, Bernie Madoff with lots of money. Enron.
Yeah, and of course, Conrad Black is another name.
Oh yeah, the Hollinger.
In that regard, actually, we wouldn't be calling it a Ponzi scheme if Madoff had been the first. We'd be calling it a Madoff scheme, wouldn't we?
Yep, because he made off.
And he was way more successful at it than Charles Ponzi was.
Mm-hmm.
He was brought down by forensic accounting, basically.
Yep.
Right.
Because they go down, it's a very, very careful tool that's used to utilize where did this money come from? Where did it go? Where did that money go? Then it seems to be coming back again for some reason, but in larger amounts.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, this is one thing have you ever participated in forensic accounting? I have. I've had
I know people who've done it from a I know people who've given expert evidence in this field of civil matters. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I would conduct an operational audit. A forensic auditor would go in and do the forensic audit. Yeah. And we would work and exchange notes. I would do the operation. It was very interesting.
The other thing,
I would love to do a forensic audit.
The other thing to note about this, by the way, is document audits, right? Mm-hmm. For example, documents documents about clients, documents about patient records, for example, in a medical practice. If those documents were copied or fabricated, you can tell those sorts of things, and there are document experts. And then we get into another part, a parallel path, which is, of course, digital forensics. And this is like, for example, deleted documents. Hey, we can
deleted emails and documents.
Deleted emails, deleted documents. You can recover. Not only can you find them, you can recover them.
Absolutely.
Right.
And this is why it's very important.
That's a trail of evidence right there.
Yep. And this is something that's very commonly done by people, assuming that their employer, their spouse, or somebody else is never going to find out that these documents have been deleted. There they are. I found them.
Yeah. Absolutely, and the point being is that there's a lot, and if you think about it, it's just like it's the mentality, if you like, of well, if I cross the road while the traffic light's red, they're not going to notice me, except that you happen to appear on some CCTV camera down the road.
Yep.
Right. So From the left, they can tell a man and a woman crossed the road 350 meters away, that they were facing that direction, so they don't have their facial image. But the camera on that side, another 700 meters away, can actually pick up their facial image.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not suggesting that Canadian police would then be arresting you for jaywalking.
Oh yes, I had one officer was teasing me one time about the jaywalking. I just told them, go ahead, write the ticket. I never did.
Yeah.
But they could technically, especially if you're putting anybody at risk.
And another aspect, and again, we're going back, this actually sits across all aspects of the crimes we've been talking about. Forensic psychology, right? So the psychology of dead people or the psychology associated with crimes and criminals. Part of that is that, for example, the people like the FBI and major crime detection organizations like FBI, like MI5, like, let's say, Scotland Yard, let's say also APP, can also do pathology about the types of people that cause these particular crimes. Who am I looking for? Profiling.
Mm-hmm.
Profiling has a bad rap, but it also has a lot of interesting concepts to it.
There's a lot of interesting things that can come out of profiling. Like you can also determine who might not have committed that type of crime.
Yeah.
Because there are certain things that would follow with the crime, or certain patterns or behavioral patterns that would be associated with particular types of crime.
Yeah.
Sometimes people want to get caught.
Well, in fact, actually, that has happened to a few serial killers, hasn't it?
And so they make an effort to. It's almost like they don't care if there's CCTV cameras. They're there.
Yeah.
It's interesting how a lot of that happens. And then there's other people who are very conscious of different things. Like I talked to you earlier about the guy who cut off the guy's finger, just not because he wanted to torture him, because he just wanted to access his computer.
We were joking about that one earlier on. His thumbprint is used to get onto certain things. So you chop off his thumb and carry it around with you in your top pocket.
I'd rather make a mold of a person's thumb and then use the mold and go. Rather than take a person's thumb.
Well, actually, that's an interesting question. But hey, there was one of these fictional films, of course, where they were talking about you can't use a mold. It has to be particular pliability.
Mm-hmm.
Like, oh my God, are you serious?
Yeah.
Anyway. So psychology of criminals is an interesting thing, and there's a lot of studies going on for that sort of thing.
Yeah, and these things they're interesting. You read it. The Behavior Analysis Unit in Quantico, Virginia, they have people. That's where they learn this type of thing, how to profile killers. And there are some people who got PhDs in profiling.
Yeah,
they generally come up through psychology. But they also have other things like criminology and other types of training, and they've also been through investigations, police departments, things like that, and they can do a lot of that. And it's interesting. Sometimes they're downright scary how they are.
And you think to yourself when you see some of these documentaries about it, oh my God, I wish I wasn't. I'm glad I wasn't there.
Yep. And they tell people, about how to be aware of people, and then they tell people, the types of people that could be doing these sorts of things.
And at the end of the day,
people that are prone to do different types of crime. Like there are people who are non-violent, but they will do things like they'll commit fraud, massive fraud, but they won't kill anybody.
Well, it's the one that always amazes me. It's like your the email that you get, your Scotiabank account is in debit. And what do? You open up the email and you go, what? It's not click. No.
Yeah.
Right?
I delete it because I don't have a Scotiabank account.
Well, that's always the amazing thing that I get. It's like, your RBC account is in the red. No, yeah. I don't have an RBC account. Delete.
Or even if they told me from a bank that I do deal with, even if they did tell me, and then I said, guess what? I said, why would the bank send me an email?
Yeah.
Right? Why doesn't the bank just pick up the phone and call me?
Well, even if they pick up the phone, they're probably not going to anyway.
Yeah, exactly. Right? But if there's some fraud on the account, like I got a letter, I got something the other day on my cell phone from the loss prevention department for credit cards at TD. And yes, this was legit.
Yeah.
Somebody was trying to bill something to my credit card, for a few $100s. I forget what it was. And they asked me, did I order it? And I said, no, I tried to cancel that. But maybe I pressed the wrong button or something. I don't know. Because everything being so automated nowadays, you don't know. So I had to spend 2.5 hours today, first fixing it with the people that I needed to cancel with, and then fixing it with the bank to make sure the people from the bank knew that they wouldn't get back again.
I had this phone call a few weeks ago as well, something similar to that. Hey, this is the fraud department of such and such bank. Did you have this transaction? Is that a valid transaction? Yeah, that's a valid transaction from my account. Mm-hmm. But that kind of then caused me to go look in my account. And guess what I was doing 2 minutes after that phone call ended?
Oh, wow.
I was calling them back again and saying, hey, I found a fraudulent thing on my account.
Yeah. Was that something to link to your OnlyFans page, or you're showing me that?
You're dreaming, madam.
OnlyFans, Peter G.
You're dreaming, madam. Nothing to do with me. No, and the interesting thing is, they were asking me about something that was it was one of these annual charges, and it's probably been in my account for like 5 or 6 years, right? So, and you're asking me about that, and then it's like, well, what I found was like $60 of beauty products. So that's not me. I mean, I'm beautiful as I am. I'm beautiful enough as I am, aren't I?
You ordered lipstick and blush and eye makeup.
No, I did not. No, I didn't. Oh. And by the way, these are all crimes. Right?
Yeah.
What we're talking about here, trying to rip somebody off is a crime.
Yeah.
Right.
There's romantic scams where they come in and they start say, well, I can't do you in person. You never meet them in person, miraculously. But they somehow keep asking you for money because something keeps happening all the time. And they keep asking you for more and more money.
Yeah,
so at some point, you're going to discover that, I haven't met this person in person, but I already gave them $200,000 of my money.
Yeah.
So, I mean, there's got to be a point where you say no.
I think the point when I say no is, can I borrow $200?
No.
Piss off.
Yeah. Exactly.
Unfollow, unfriend, delete, block.
Yeah, I get a lot of those. People just sending, oh, well, I need this because I need this for the end of the month. I don't have any groceries. And I look at this and who is this person? Get out of here.
and it's like, yeah. And my response to that is, neither do I. Join the party.
Yep, exactly. We're all broke.
Right. Well, and hey, I'd be saying the same thing whether I had $1 million in my account.
Yeah, exactly. There's a lot of scams out there. There's a lot of people being scammed, but different things.
Yeah, I'd be saying the same. Whether I've got $0 in my bank account or $100 million, I'd be saying the same thing.
And these are digital scams.
Yeah,
where
there are a lot of digital
or their cell phone.
Yep. Okay, so I think that's been an interesting topic, forensics. We're going to come back at some point with forensics for civil matters, because they do exist. It does matter.
For lawsuits.
Yeah.
Right.
And even, for example, evidence that is given to the land, police evidence that's given to the landlord and tenant board may matter.
Yeah, exactly. Police evidence, again, forensic accounting for people who have like what we call time theft for employees.
Yep.
Things like that. There's a lot of different types of things that could happen in that sort of circumstances. That some of them are better dealt with through a lawsuit as opposed to criminal.
Yep. Oh,
and
yeah.
Personal injury. Is somebody really injured, or are they like?
Actually, in America, they spend a lot of time over that because, of course, the lawsuits are quite high, large figures over there.
Yeah.
All right. They will send a private investigator around to see whether that collar that you're wearing is real. You know, the the type of collar I'm talking about.
Yes.
When you have a bad neck, and then you take it off. And now you're playing soccer.
Yep.
That ain't
Or
real.
you just jump in your pool or come out and carry groceries up to the backyard and everything else. Then suddenly when someone sees you, oh, my back, my neck, oh, up.
Yeah. Yeah.
After they went dancing out of the court after they've been given money as an award.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
These sorts of things we'll talk about at another time about how that could apply civilly.
Yeah. Okay. So for us, this has been an interesting theoretical discussion because paralegals don't practice in many of these types of criminal matters that we've been discussing today. So that's an important thing to understand. And also, got to say that if you need to contact Invictus Legal LLP, you can do so by calling 905-688-5598 or email Angela at angela@weareinvictus.legal, myself at peter@weareinvictus.legal, or go to our website, which is weareinvictus.legal, with the relevant HTTPSs. And we have got one more comment. As always, Rob says thank you.
Thank you, Rob.
Yeah.
Always good to have you on our show to comment and to cheer us on.
Okay, and so Angela, this is your portion of the show.
So what you hear today on Spin Legal, whether it's in this show or in others in the series, is not an instruction manual. Okay? It is not legal advice. If you need legal advice or something happened to you or you're worried about something, that could have legal implications, or you worried that you might be charged with something, then contact a paralegal or a lawyer and they will direct you accordingly.
Yep. All right. And thank you everybody for being here. And as I say, once again, Spin Legal is now on its own page, Spin Legal on Facebook. It's new. It's not got very many followers yet, but we are building that. It's also published on the Invictus Legal page on Facebook, and at some point we will be bringing it to an end on the Invictus Legal page, because that will become more about communications with from Invictus Legal about various things. And the third page that it's published on is YouTube. It is my personal YouTube page.
Yeah. And don't forget his OnlyFans page too.
Dream on, lady. All right. So I think it's time for us to say goodbye and have a great day, everybody. And we'll be back at 6:15 next week.
Take care. Have a nice evening.
Bye.